Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today we're talking about AIPAC. It's something we do on here. Now, this story is the story where that I started researching about whether or not JFK told that AIPAC that they would have to register as foreign agents. And that is fact check true, so I'm not going to bury the lead on that. But man, there's a really interesting story about how AIPAC got founded. And it's scandalous, we'll say, right? So I'm just going to tell the story as quick as I can. There's a great New York Times, and I've got it linked in the description on an archived website, Wayback Machine, so you can check it out. But the story is fascinating. It's so interesting how it parallels to today what's going on in Israel. So first, we're going to talk about the founder, the guy who founded it, right? And it's interesting to learn about him because he 2 separate times had already registered as a foreign agent working for Israel under FARA, right? And the whole question is, should AIPAC have to register under FARA? So their founder did. So let me show you this. It says AIPAC was founded by Isaiah L. Sai Kenan, springing from the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. That's the AZCPA. Kenan registered twice with the U.S. Department of Justice under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA, as a foreign agent for Israel. On April 21st, 1947, he registered as an agent of the American section of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Sai Kenan also registered at FARA as an agent for the Israel Information Services on October 12, 1948 through May 13, 1951. Now we go to the Washington Post, and I'm going to tell you about the story about this. This starts with Dwight Eisenhower was the first one who stood up against Israel. And so keep in mind, this is before AIPAC existed, because AIPAC is going to come out of this AZPAC, right? It's going to change its name, basically. And so neither of them exist at the point that this massacre happens and the deteriorations of relations with Israel, right? So check the story out. But despite their earlier successes, Kenan and other American champions of Israel faced challenges after Dwight Eisenhower entered the White House in 1953. Ike's Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, said he wanted to pursue a balanced, neutral policy toward the Israeli-Arab conflict, not what Israel supporters wished to hear. In the fall of 1953, Eisenhower briefly suspended the delivery of U.S. aid to Israel after it violated the terms of a UN-brokered armistice agreement with Syria by venturing into a demilitarized zone to divert the waters of the Jordan River. Water diversion, this is important. Eisenhower and Dulles resolved to use their leverage to get Israel to back off. However, Israel and the United States apparently agreed to keep Eisenhower's action quiet in hopes of a quick resolution. But on October 15, 1953, all hell broke loose. News spread that a special Israeli army unit had struck into the Jordanian-occupied West Bank and committed a massacre in the Palestinian village of Kibbutz, killing more than 60 civilians indiscriminately in retaliation for the murder of a Jewish woman and her 2 children in Israel on the night of October 12th. Any parallels to what's going on now? Now, this is under Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. Okay. The strike reflected Israeli policy. Ever since the end of the 1948 war, Palestinians had frequently crossed the so-called Green Line into Israel. Most had been driven or had fled from their homes in what was now Israel and simply wished to return. But some committed violence against Israelis. Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion had fixed on a policy of reprisals, military assaults, intentionally disproportionate on local Arab populations as a response to any such attacks. After the October 12th killings, Ben-Gurion and top colleagues chose nearby Kibbutz to suffer retribution. The outcry was sharp and wide. Time magazine carried a shocking account of deliberate, even casual mass murder by Israeli soldiers at Kibbutz, quote, slouching, smoking, and joking. The New York Times ran extensive excerpts from a UN commission that refuted Israeli lies about the incident. It's just like today. What is this, 52 or 53? So 4 to 5 years after Israel formed, it's the exact same today. That's amazing. It's 70 years later. Amazing. Israel's most active U.S. supporters realized how severe the danger of damage to Israel was. Kenan wrote of the ill effect of Kibbutz on what he called, quote, our propaganda, end quote. After Kibbutz, Dulles, the Secretary of State under Eisenhower, confirmed for the first time that Washington was holding up aid to Israel. The United States supported a censure of Israel in the UN Security Council. U.S. aid soon resumed after Israel pledged it would stop its work at the controversial water diversion site, which is the one in Syria that they mentioned earlier, right? So they have no power. Like, imagine the U.S. in the Security Council and the UN Security Council is going to be the one to do the censure, not veto the censure, because that's how it happens nowadays if you're not keeping an eye on things. Okay. Aware Israel's reputation in the United States had been tarnished, American Jewish supporters of Israel scrambled to mount a damage control effort in late 1953 and early 1954. Keenan managed this ad hoc effort involving many parties in Washington and around the country, but it was clear that a firmer, more nimble, ongoing structure of advocacy for Israel was necessary to better meet such challenges. In March 1954, Keenan and his associates announced the formation of the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs, AZCPA, which would be renamed AIPAC in 1959, and thus launched the modern Israel lobby. Keenan had additional reasons for forming a new advocacy group in early 1954. U.S. officials had been inquiring into whether his then employer, the American Zionist Council, or the AZC, ought to register as the agent of a foreign power, which might limit its activities and complicate its fundings. It made sense for the council to consider spinning off a new lobbying group with a cleaner financial basis. Okay, so that's how it started. It was scandalous when it started because Israel was doing scandalous things, so they had to make this propaganda organization, which became AIPAC, but they had to get clean of the one that already they were trying to register under FARA, right, with cleaner financials, right? And so I'm gonna read you this next part out of this. It's a different part out of that Washington Post article, and I think it's amazing. And then we're gonna talk about like what happened with JFK in the 60s, and then we're gonna go to the 70s and see how it changed. Listen to this. It showed that there was nothing Israel might do that would jeopardize American Jewish support. Indeed, to some of the Jewish community, the more disturbing Israeli behavior was, the more Israel needed their ardent advocacy. So began a 3-decade cycle, one that did not end until Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon, in which American Jews closed ranks to support Israel regardless of circumstances. Jews harboring reservations about Israeli actions found it extremely hard to gain a foothold in Jewish communal life, something that is less true today, but still a central reality in Jewish America. So literally they had a cancel culture in this 3-decade period where if you don't support Israel, you don't gain a foothold in Jewish cultural life. And the more terrible Israel's behavior was, the more evil it was, the more Jews had to advocate for Israel, right? It's sick stuff. Anyways, so now let's get to the JFK stuff. Okay, so remember when JFK was president? So RFK Jr.'s father was the attorney general, right? And I didn't do this highlighting on this part, so it just is what it is. In 1962, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy ordered the AZC to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act of FARA as the foreign agent of the Jewish agency. In 1963, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee held hearings regarding its funding. U.S. Department of Justice files reveal that the Kennedy administration ordered the American Zionist Council to register as the agent of Israel under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. These files were declassified in 2008. Okay, and if you're wondering, I know. The first question I had was, when did he make these orders, this anti-Israel stuff, and when did he die? He gave these orders on November 1st of 1962, and he was assassinated on November 22nd of the following year, 1963, so 1 year and 3 weeks later. So it wasn't immediately after, because everybody wants to say they know exactly the reason JFK died. Anyways, let's go to the 60s and see what happens, right? In the early 1960s, Israel funneled $5 million, more than $35 million in today's dollars, into U.S. propaganda and lobbying operations. The funds were channeled via the quasi-governmental Jewish agency's New York office into an Israel lobby umbrella group, the American Zionist Council. Senate Foreign Relations Committee investigations and hearings documented funding, flows, propaganda, and public relations effort and put them into the record. But the true fate of the American Zionist Council was never known, except that its major functions were visibly shut down and shifted over to a former AZC unit known as the Kennan Committee, called the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, in the late 1960s. So this whole thing is like, they're just finding different ways to move around money. When I did that episode on the Indiana election and AIPAC's influence on it, and it wasn't AIPAC doing the funding. AIPAC's PAC was funding a PAC with the National Democracy Project, just something vague like that, you know? And so they do all types of really banker-esque stuff with the money, we'll just say. Okay, now let's go to the 1970s. Since the late 1970s, it has informally directed substantial campaign contributions towards chosen candidates for Congress. Its messaging on the Middle East is essential in Washington's foreign policy conversation. Now, I think that AIPAC's pack that they currently have is fairly new. I mean, like within the last couple of years, I feel like, and I just feel like they just, whatever happens, they just use miscellaneous and different means to direct the money. And nobody disputes that it's coming from them, but for some reason they just do different stuff. So now let's talk about this. Should AIPAC register as foreign agents, right? So, I mean, the legal answer is kind of no. Like, I don't want to do all the definitions and all the exactly under FARA, right? But basically it breaks down to, there has to be a foreign principal involved, okay? So if a foreign principal, say an Israeli, anybody in the Israeli government is directing somebody in the United States to do something, if you could prove that, definitely, but you can't really prove that, right? If the Israeli government was funneling the money, you could do it. It would be a foreign principal. But under my understanding of it, you can't get them to register. But imagine this. Imagine if Israeli citizens in Tel Aviv were sending money to AIPAC. Would that count as a foreign principal? Yeah, right? But they don't do that. They don't take any, AIPAC does not take money from Israel, right? Now, let me ask you another question. What if the Cohens next door are Israeli citizens and American citizens, and they put the money in? What if their main business is a business in Israel where they make the money and they pay the taxes on it? And do you know what I'm saying? And so it comes down to this division of the dual citizenship loyalty thing is trash, you know, because when you immigrate to this country legally and you take the oath, your oath is to swear absolute no allegiance to the country you've left and all of your allegiance to this country. How are you a citizen of this country, but you can gain citizenship in another country, like dual citizenship? How does that work? Okay, so imagine you do that, and there's nothing nefarious about it. Let's say you get dual citizenship with Canada. Normally, it's Canadians getting dual citizenship in America, but let's say you're American, you get dual citizenship in Canada. Okay. Now, what if you're really wealthy or just pretty wealthy and you start funneling tons of money into pro-Canada lobbying organizations in the United States? All of a sudden, I got to say, you don't have any loyalty to the United States. So the principle I'm saying doesn't matter if you're Semitic, Jewish, Israeli, nobody cares. They care that you're supporting a foreign nation in front of the needs of this nation because your true loyalty lies there, in which case that should be completely illegal. So, I mean, how would you, because, oh my gosh, how would you even separate? See, I just want a list of all the Congress people in both houses, the House and the Senate, who are dual citizens. I just want a list, but you can't get that. You can't get that from public officials. You certainly can't get it from the Cohens next door, right? So anyways, basically the answer is JFK's administration did do the thing, right? Eisenhower's tried to do some stuff. It's just not all cut and dry because they move the money around in these strange ways. And any lobbying group that lobbies on behalf of a foreign country, I mean, like if you're an arms manufacturer and you want to lobby to sell those arms, I mean, you're an American company, there should be limits, right? Of course. But for a foreign country, it's insane. Where's the Chinese lobby trying to get the U.S. to go along with the Belt and Road Initiative to pay some of the? There's not a thing like that, you know. Anyways, that's what I got for you. I thought it was really interesting going down the road and seeing what's true and what's not. So tomorrow I got an episode. It's kind of a deprogramming episode about how we get trapped in these bubbles and stuff, and how we got to think outside of them. So hope to see you there.